Hey everybody, Cody Menz here. I have another WoT's new video for you today. Also the scavenger hunt code and a huge recap of the developer Q&A that myself, 13 Disciple, Nick Shocks, Cabbage Mechanic, Tragic Loss, Domo Sapien, Wargaming NA held yesterday basically on the Wargaming NA channel with two Wargaming developers, Andre and Maxime. Basically, we're gonna go over that in a moment here. Just the scavenger hunt for today. You have the code above me. Bottom of the screen is also Diego. Diego is going to be the CC for tomorrow. You can find his link in the video description here. You can also find my code in the title, the description, on the screen, everywhere. Basically for today. So the scavenger hunt, as of right now, you know, with this being the 25th code, you should get some pretty nice rewards today. And, you know, we still have some codes left for the remainder of the month for some extra boosters and some, you know, other goodies as well. All right, so getting into some things before I get into the Q&A, basically we have the Battle of Berlin was announced. Basically it's going to be an upcoming PvE based event, and that's going to start, you know, May 3rd, run to the 18th, and it's going to be separate. There's I believe 4 maps, and there's basically different stages and stuff, and you know, we're going to be attacking instead of defending like last year in Homefront. Now, one of the rewards, it doesn't say in there, but our friends over at WoT Express, basically one of the rewards is basically going to be the tier 7 basically IS-2 shielded tank, and it's going to be in a marathon-esque way where I guess the more you play Battle of Berlin mode, maybe you can unlock this tank for free. If not, you can buy it, and it's 6,000 gold for the full price of it. You know, the tank itself, who knows if it's bundled with stuff, so on and so forth, but that's apparently the main reward for this iteration of the PvE. Frontline basically is going to start the 27th here, so we're going to have the third, you know, round of Frontline. There's going to be one more, and then we're going to take a little breather, and then Steel Hunter comes back later in the year. Tank Brawl is going on right now. I haven't played it yet. However, you know, 7v7 mode. This is the first we're seeing it outside of the Battle of the Bloggers, you know, that they did late last or early this year. No, early this year. Who knows what year it is with everything going on nowadays. But basically 7v7, it's kind of fun. Who knows when we'll see it come back, but they're trying to bring it back more frequently from my understanding. The 10th anniversary, since my last video is kicked off. If you literally missed this gigantic thing that's behind my webcam in the garage, so this, you're blind. But there's a ton of cool stuff, and from what I've seen, they are going to be continually adding more and more and more stuff into the shop for each one of the basically, I guess, milestones and like acts that they're doing for this. And I don't believe they're actually removing things, so you can wait to buy things, but I would definitely keep an eye on things, you know, in between acts to make sure that they don't remove something that you might like. Now, getting into the World of Tanks NA developer stream that myself, Nick, and 13 Disciple participated in. So we had the creative director, Andre, and also the publishing director, Maxime. Basically, it was awesome. You know, I was really happy that I was able to participate. It was fun chatting. And also, Cabbage, Tragic, Damo did a really nice job. Helping to put it all together, and you know, everything was great. We had some pretty good questions, you know, we got some good answers, and if you want to watch the recording of this, click the link. All these links that I've shown so far are in the order of how you've seen them here, which, sorry, I kind of had to take a peek at this. And basically you can pop over to their Twitch channel and you can watch the recording. I believe it should be on YouTube as well on the World of Tanks NA, but I'm not exactly 100% sure about that yet. So we are gonna, hey, ads on my website, gotta pay for it somehow. I've got a typed up, basically, it's not 100%. I was typing this up as it was going on. So Definitely take things a little bit. You gotta read and see what they were kind of portraying, and that's where watching the recording, I highly recommend it. It is long, about 2 hours, but it is really interesting hearing them describe things about how the game works or why they might not do something. This is me just typing the little bits of info. That way I can go over it here in the video without it being 2 hours long. Definitely recommend watching it. Alright, so first off, so these are the questions that myself, 13 Disciple, and Nick asked. Pretty much anything bolded that you see on this link to my website. Anything bolded is basically a question, and then anything not bolded is an answer. So specifically about wheel tank rebalance, they're going to start with increasing the effect for wheels being damaged to slow tanks down. This has been brought up a couple times before, but it's nice for them to clarify it. And they're going to increase the terrain penalty for each wheel being knocked out. And also, if basically that doesn't work, then they're going to go forward with other aspects of the tank. However, they do feel like by increasing the penalty, mobility penalties for wheels being knocked out, even maybe assist damage being added in for wheels, then we will see these tanks be a little bit less competitive because they're a little bit overperforming. Basically, they note it, the wheels do kind of act as space armor right now, and they are soaking up shells as well. So fire mechanics, this was a pretty interesting question. Does a fire on a tank go out faster if you aren't moving? Because apparently the WGNA wiki page basically stated, if you stop moving, I guess it goes out faster. They said it's absolutely not true. They couldn't find anything because they looked up all of these things to provide really good answers for us. We're pretty much allowed to ask anything we wanted. We did give them a little bit of heads up on some talking points. That way, as in this case for the fire mechanics, they honestly looked pretty hard and they could not find anything other than possibly in the very beginning workings of the game it might have been that way, which is why it's in the wiki. However, no longer that case. Doesn't matter if you're driving full speed, stopped, or anything, fires aren't affected by that. Why does it take so long to rebalance overperforming tanks? Sometimes they basically state 1 to 2 quarters, so about 6 months or so. They like to basically look when a tank's released or like new game mechanics, and they want to see, so usually early adopters, so like hardcore players and like really veteran players that are really a little bit above average, get the tank. However, they don't want to change those tanks super fast before they basically have enough data to see, okay, well, it's really good in good players' hands. However, the average and low, casual players, I should say, because there's nothing wrong with not being a really good player. Those people are performing normally. So they want to see how it affects each different type of the player base. And specifically, they try to see, for example, say if a 50% player, and this is the example I wrote here, they didn't provide like exact numbers, but this is how they explained it. If a 50% player, say across your whole account, has like a 52% win percentage in a tank that's broken, that the player base considers, it's probably okay. However, if a 50% player has like a 65% win percentage, and this goes for like really good players and stuff like that too, like if your win percentage is really different in that tank compared to the rest of your tanks, there might be something wrong with it. But this is where Wargaming likes to look for at least, a few months up to, say half a year or so before making a decision. It kind of gives you an idea on how they do things. Whether you agree with them or not, that's another thing. So this is a question I had asked. So we saw collector vehicles, the category get added in with 1.9. Do they have any plans to release non-premium tanks that wouldn't fit into like the tech tree? Say like a unique tier 9, tier 10, and possibly even this little second question here, we might see like a multinational tank collection being added into the game where people can just buy them with credits or something like that. And one of their answers a little bit further on too, and with this that I don't have typed in here, this is where watching that replay of the stream is really nice. One of the hurdles they have, because if you start reading ahead of me here, they do plan on possibly adding this in, and they note that it does allow them to add in something like this and add in more kind of one-off tanks or smaller nations, is the criteria to allow people to buy those tanks, because you don't want to just have, like, say, a multinational tank collection and let any player say, I'm going to buy a tier 10 medium tank, from whatever nation. Should we lock them behind somebody having just one tier 10 medium tank in another nation? Or should we allow it for people who have, like, I don't know, 5, 10 tier 10s? They didn't go into specifics like that, but that's generally something they brought up. But basically, no short-term plans, like near-term plans, for adding in collector vehicles, new ones, and also new nations into them. However, they can't share all the info yet on that. However, as they said, it is a tool that does open up that possibility that they didn't have as of last year. And specifically, so that was Max who answered that. And then Andre said, so like Argentinian tanks, Hungarian tanks, and start listing off some specific nations. That's definitely something they have considered. And they were working on last year a multinational tech tree, and they decided to kind of push it into the backlog into like long-term plans because it wasn't feasible until they put tank collections in the game. So that's something that's really exciting, for the future of World of Tanks, because, we're going to possibly see, some tanks that they're not going to go shove into the American tech tree, or, say a new nation. And, we don't want them to sell premium after premium after premium. Like, yeah, that's how they make their money, but some tanks that might not fit as a premium tank in a different tier or something would work perfectly as a collection tank and still get people to play, spend money to unlock them. So sandbox testing and ammo changes. So they stated basically the sandbox test that we did last go around, we saw tank HP changes for low tiers get added in, and these tech tree changes in 1.9. However, it was more of a collection of everything, and it was massive, to where we never really intended to basically release it all at once. So we decided, and they're basically still working on the other pieces, to split them up, work on them more, and release them gradually. And specifically, there's going to be another sandbox test, and we're not going to see say the shell changes and stuff, and SPG changes, HE changes, until there's another sandbox. But they did state, so their premium shell and standard shells went over really well. People like those changes. However, the HE changes and SPG changes did not go over very well. However, Wargaming, and I agree with this, you can't do one without the other. You can't just change AP, APCR, heat shells, and not change HE, HESH, artillery. You can't change one without changing the other, because then you have two different systems fighting each other. It doesn't work. So they're basically actively working on improving, both of these changes, and they're going to put them on another sandbox. And hopefully this time, now that they know what worked with the premium shells and standard shell changes, they'll be able to, fix it, fix like HE, HESH, and ARTI, and that way they can release them. So that was definitely a cool answer they had there. Have they considered basically, aside from like changing damage, penetration, stuff like that with shell changes, have they considered also affecting and tweaking the speeds, the normalizations, and also RNG more between different shells to balance them in these tests that they're doing? They don't specifically want to change those values, they said. They've tried to do specifically some sigma changes, so that's aiming circle, your shot distribution there. However, they found like it was overly complicated and not necessary, to where all it really did, they feel like they're able to do that without addressing those issues. Basically, they're able to do that. They don't want to do anything super complicated if they don't have to, basically. So Andre, he had a little story about something that they ran into last year. It was a big thing with people complaining about seeing the same maps over and over and over again. And he said they actually didn't really change anything like significantly, into Matchmaker. However, people have complained a lot less about that recently. I've definitely noticed it now that has come up. What they implemented last year, though, without really telling anybody, was they put a rule into matchmaking where you don't see the same map. So that excludes, you might see the same map for like encounter and standard. You don't really see the same map battle after battle. Whether that's like the same team repeatedly or the same map entirely. He specifically said within 7 battles. It's not stopping you from seeing it the 8th battle, but they put a rule into matchmaking to basically try to stop that. But if you have like an assault encounter, you know, those turned on, you do have the possibility, from my understanding, to still see them within that. So shell rebalance. Why do premium shells cost more? Isn't that like pay to advantage? Are you considering basically after, say, they nerf special shells to reduce the price? This was a really interesting question. I didn't really consider this, but it does make sense. So they said yes and no. They considered it, but no, they are not considering it, and they're not doing that. So the way that they're actually determining the cost of shells is, so what he said, the effective damage per minute of a tank. So that's not like, take for example right now, like the tank I have in the background, T125, I have 2,926 DPM with the standard shell and the heat shell. They would consider the effective, say, DPM of the heat shell actually higher because you're able to penetrate more things easier. So since the effective DPM, like they didn't give like a, say, like a formula or something to use. However, basically the probability to cause damage, you know, multiplied by the, say, DPM or damage per shot or whatever, they're using that to balance the price of shells. So they did state that once they rebalance shells, you know, whether it's, say, nerfing premium round damage or whatever, they are going to look into that and adjust the shell costs accordingly. However, whatever tank or whatever shells, so say special shells, if they still have an effective DPM, even with the lower damage per shot, they still might cost more. So that's how they're balancing it. I thought that was actually really interesting, and you know, it changes my opinion a little bit on shell costs in a sense, because it does make sense. So Leopard 1, STB 1 changes were received well. How about some changes for the E50M, the 30B, T62A? What about, and also the 430U nerfs? So they do have plans to try to rebalance some of the older tanks, and they specifically said both of these guys really like the E50M line, and specifically that tank, yes. Is it coming super soon? They don't know exactly, but they do want to find some sort of like niche, whether it's a role, and the basically buff older tanks that are struggling. Possibly, like I put a little question mark here, maybe later this year we might see some stuff when it comes to that, but that was, you know, that's a question mark on, you know, what exactly they meant. And then they started talking about the 121, that it's in a very hard spot, especially with the 430U being very close to it, but the 430U is much better than, you know, the 121. So they're trying to find basically what to do with the 121, and it is a problem tank. And they were pressed, I believe Nick asked the question, they were pressed like, yes, 121, they know it's an issue, official answer. They, you know, they're looking to do something to, I guess, make it stand out from the 430U, improve it, because it's definitely struggling. So specifically onto the T110E5, this was my question I really wanted answered. You know, they're super testing it, but do they consider adding the 10 degrees of gun depression that the T110 series called for, or even slight forward and reverse buff to make it play like the M54 Renegade that a lot of people love and is like a tier 8 T110E5? So basically Andre, he said he couldn't go into super depth in a way about it in a sense, but he said he would pass that idea kind of on to the head of balance. However, they do want to keep the playstyle somewhat similar to how it is now. I think the issue is The M103 is an actual tank and it has 8 degrees of gun depression. They might not want to go from 10 degrees, then to 8 degrees on the M103, then back to 10. I don't think that's that big of a concern, but you know, I get where they're coming from, even though I disagree with them. Specifically though, no plans to remove the cupola. I 100% agree with that. Cupola is not the problem of the tank. It used to be great even before the cupola became an issue later on. The cupola is not the issue. I know Blitz shaved it off, but like he was saying, if you cut the cupola off the T110E5, it's not actually the T110E5 anymore. Like the tank, even though it wasn't ever like fully produced and fielded, it was actually designed. It had a wooden mock-up design, and it had that cupola on it. T110E3 is pretty close to the design as well. Tank looks as it is. T110E4 looks a little bit different than it envisioned, but that tank again, like if you start cutting cupolas off, they're no longer the tanks that they're actually representing. There's a difference between just cutting it off visually and maybe throwing more armor on it. He wouldn't exactly say what they have planned for it, but basically, and like he was talking about it, and I thought it was interesting. I knew this already, but a lot of people probably don't. Like the T110 series was actually designed to be transported around Europe, basically on trains, and to specifically fight in tunnels and the Alps and that specific area. You know, if there was a ton of fighting to be done there, you know, the US was designing the T110 series to specifically fight there. That's where if you think about the T110E3, just crap ton of armor and a gun. I believe it was supposed to mount 120 millimeter in actuality. If you think about it, T110E3, that's perfect for frickin' fighting in a tunnel. T110E5 was basically a variant. I forget. So I guess the 5th variant, you know, if you read into the 5 at the end of it, where they wanted to add a turret onto it too. And there's also the E4. There was different versions of it. But all of them, so my question about asking 10 degrees of gun depression still called, the designs all called for 10 degrees of gun depression. E3, I don't know about the E4 specifically, but I do know the E5, the turret one, called for 10 degrees of gun depression. So that's where, you know, we'll see what happens with that, but I think it's something that the tank needs, but who knows. Next up, basically T95 FE4201 279E. What are they going to do about it? They're overpowered. Are they going to rebalance them? Do anything about them in rank battles and stuff? So basically, Andre, he immediately said he actually had a meeting earlier today, because this was taken like 7, 8 o'clock at their time today when we did our live streams. They actually did have a meeting today about those two tanks, figuring out what they want to do about them. And this is basically, he was clear that these are like speculations, where nothing's set in stone, but they are discussing ways to handle these tanks. Basically, right now they're thinking matchmaking changes, you know, whether it's mirroring them on teams or possibly banning them from rank battles entirely, like any reward tanks, basically banning them from ranked battles, possibly even clan wars. But they're not exactly set on that yet. And they basically noted that they don't want people, especially for the 279E, where you work your butt off to get that tank, to basically nerf it afterwards and piss those people off. I agree with that in a sense. However, I still feel like they should do something balance-wise to them. Like, I get bringing all the tanks that are underperforming up to their levels, but I feel at the same time doing small changes, and that's where he did say they don't want to just start hitting them, I think he said with a hammer or something, like nerfing them. I agreed, like just nerfing them outright and, you know, say pissing people off isn't the best course of action, but he did say nerfing and buffing them in other areas to kind of rebalance them so they perform better is a possible route they might take later on, albeit, you know, he didn't say it's likely. So, rank battles and clan wars. This is where possibly having some special restrictions on provinces, like having, so on a global map, like certain maps having certain tiers or certain nations. And this is where they started talking about long-term for clan wars. They do plan on evolving clan wars more so in the somewhat near to maybe end of this year, maybe even next year or something, releasing some stuff about including smaller clans into the global map and moving it somewhat, they said, ideally, and again, who knows if this is coming, this was kind of their opinion, moving it kind of like Crusader Kings in a sense, they mentioned, I believe, like adding in more political stuff, large and small clans both can participate, and like more depth to it. They plan on adding more depth to basically the endgame clan war competitive scene. So with the T-3485M new 3D style coming with the huge flag on it, are we going to see like an antenna physics or other physics added onto tank models? And this is where this applies to more than just this. They like to test features on a limited scale, and that's where they said, like, thank you for asking this and noticing it. So they're testing, basically, from what they said, this flag mechanic. So something on a tank that's moving around and stuff. They like to test something small before adding in something big and server wide. So basically correct on, they do want to add in customization of tanks that do behave, you know, based off of like moving, stuff like that. And they do plan on bringing in more features to tanks like that. So that's something cool, you know, that we're gonna see. Minsk rework. So yes, Minsk is gonna come eventually. However, so they said it passed testing. You know, the map's balance, you know, the rework is done. However, they were a little bit vague, basically. So some historical or like little minor details that they want to basically do before releasing it, because they work in, you know, Wargaming works in Minsk. And basically they want to solve those minor issues that might not seem important to the player base, but they're important to them before they release a new version of it into the client. Pearl River is going to be released very soon, they said. I take that as possibly the next patch. Basically, it's done, no problems, done, release soon. Soap Rocks. So any update on Soap Rocks? Because they mentioned before that they were working on them. So they are improving. It's based off of the Havoc engine. And there's a lot more to this answer than what I typed. And again, definitely recommend you checking out the replay. Basically, the Havoc engine, Wargaming, from my understanding, didn't they buy the Havoc engine, you know, that company or whatever? It has a lower resolution, basically, the Havoc physics engine, than their own physics engine. So parts of it don't really line up super well with the new, basically, 1.0 engine that they're using. And they're actively working to improve it, because the Havoc engine is not necessarily made for games that have a lot of the calculations on the server end. It's made for more games that are client side. And unfortunately, the more stuff that's client side, the more that people can, say, mod and hack things and basically alter things gameplay wise. Wargaming doesn't want that. So basically, they explained before 1.0, they weren't actually modeling rocks. They were just part of the terrain, the ground. However, so soap rocks, the slippery rocks and slippery terrain we see, are actually now modeled individually as objects, and they're not considered just plain terrain with, you know, a texture added onto it. So that's what's causing the issue. So they're working to improve the, I guess, the resolution of these objects and how they behave, you know, with things driving on them, because originally they were not meant to be driven on basically objects, only terrain was. Alright, so as of 1.0, there was talks for basically enlarging and reworking maps such as Ensk and Mines to make them larger or re-envisioning them. And also any plans to bring back removed tanks such as South Coast, Windstorm, Swamp, Stalingrad. So basically, maps that were removed in 1.0, they released the ones that they didn't feel like had the best gameplay, and they wanted to keep in a good selection of maps, you know, dating back then. We kind of knew that. So a lot of the older maps, you know, that were removed weren't the best in their opinion. They don't rule out bringing them back, however. So basically, ones that aren't easy to fix and would kind of need to be reworked heavily, Windstorm, Stalingrad, South Coast in a sense. Maps such as like Mines and Ensk, it's a lot of work to enlarge them, and they'd almost have to re-envision them, but it's tough because they're classic maps. So, right now it's not, I guess, a super high priority for, reworking something like Mines or bringing back an old map that they haven't already picked. Right now they're focused on, so Pearl River, there's a new map, Berlin, that, basically is coming with the Road to Berlin, basically event that we're getting a PvE, and then that's coming to 15 versus 15 after that. And there's also going to be new maps in Steel Hunter as well, and other special game modes for this year. Next year in 2021, that's where they're going to basically decide, from how I understood it, either to start developing brand new maps after they get through what they're working on map-wise this year. They're either going to make brand new ones, or they're going to go back to maps such as Windstorm, South Coast, Stalingrad, and basically take them and re-envision them a little bit to add them back into game, or take some maps that are already in the game and basically rebalance them and kind of tweak them. So that's going to come after the map team gets through what they're working on this year. So adding in better audio experience for like tanks, engines, gunshots. They said that basically the sound team is working to improve things. However, nothing like super majors coming, ASAP. But the sound team always is working to improve things. But basically, there is one big limitation, as Andre pointed out, is basically the memory on older PCs that they're supporting, and also, basically they said PCs that can run on a calculator. That's one of the limiting factors that they have for sound, because they can't add in, HD sound, they were saying, and now they're going to have like basically an SD client, HD client, now they're going to have an SD HD audio client. They're going to have so many different clients if they have to now separate sound from two different, sound systems, I guess. So that's something, it makes sense, but they are saying that they want to keep improving it, and one of the limiting factors, mainly the older PCs that they support. So adding battle hits into the game, armor viewer into the client, are they ever going to do that? And this is where they talk about, so mods aren't as stable as stuff that they, do themselves, obviously. Some are difficult to add in, and they said they are actually working on incorporating some mods into the game as of right now. Specifically, armor inspector, maybe battle hits, but not in 2020, possibly next year. We'll start seeing some stuff. Right now they're saying it's actually their third time to try to add in some sort of armor viewer into World of Tanks. And so World of Warships it's a newer game, and it's in there, so that's why World of Warships apparently has it. However, with World of Tanks, one problem they have is the armor viewers, they're trying to add it in. However, they need to find a way to add in an armor viewer into the game without people being able to mod the game to allow aimbots basically to utilize these armor models that are going to be in the client then. They're trying to figure out a way, because right now any mods you use to use armor viewers basically pull that info from elsewhere. It doesn't come from Wargaming or the specific client necessarily. So they're trying to work on a way to implement it into the game. And they said most likely we're trying hard to add it in. However, they don't want to put it in and then people have auto-aim bots that basically find the weakest spot on your tank and hit you, So that makes sense. And then they talked about frontline. So the frontline HUD, so the user face that you see, like all the stuff as you're playing and you're driving your tank, that's actually completely reworked, and that's in HD essentially, they called it. Whereas the old random battle HUD is actually still old. It's really outdated, and they're going to be working on basically bringing that up and incorporating. So from my understanding from some old Q&As that they did within the past couple weeks, incorporating, say, like the mini-map pinging from Frontline, where you can ping a specific area instead of a square. So they're working to basically improve the 15 versus 15 battle user interface. Because even if you look at a Grand Battle, that user interface, it's actually different from 15 versus 15. So right now they have these three different ones. However, the game mode most people play is the most outdated. So they're working on updating that. And why doesn't Wargaming incorporate every mod? Why don't they just throw money at the mod developers and buy them? So basically they would rather reinvent them because they would work better, less bugs, less crashes, less, I guess, security concerns, and also supporting the systems they support. Some mods don't work on weaker PCs, so that's their reason why they don't just throw money at somebody, put them right in the game. So any plans to add in Latin American tanks or other nations? This was a little bit answered a little earlier, but basically then again they brought it back up and answered it again. So yes, collector tanks for future nations basically is part of their plans that don't fit into a full tech tree. And also, so they said three nations this year, so 3 new tank lines essentially. We already saw the double barrel Russian tanks. They said something about Polish tanks, which I have no idea what that is. Who knows? And basically another one's a secret, what they said. However, Japanese TDs not this year for PC, even though they're on Blitz. So basically, yeah, who knows? Like the Italian heavies were also brought up, I believe, very quickly. I don't know if they're a little bit further on here, and they said no. Basically no news on them as of right now. So basically any plans to add or to expand Twitch Prime, the care drops, they said yes, definitely. They're in talks with Twitch right now to hash out all the details. And specifically, I chimed in and I'm like, did you just say Twitch drops for World of Tanks? And he said yes, as long as everything works with what they're discussing with Twitch. Because they do, it's a business transaction. It has to make sense for both of them. They do plan on trying to add in Twitch drops for World of Tanks. So people watching live streams on Twitch, you basically, if you already get care drops, care packages, I guess, from Twitch, you basically attach your Wargaming account. If you watch streamers that have drops enabled, you'll get stuff in game basically through Twitch, and it goes on your account just for watching people. That's what a Twitch drop is. I think that's pretty nice. I'm a little biased though because I stream on Twitch, so yeah. So 10-year anniversary events. So Max specifically started talking about there's something really large in August coming. So August is actually the release date, which is they probably picked August as the game released in August however many moons ago. And they're planning something really special, really big. They don't want to spoil it. Lots of, he said, rewards for cosmetics, camouflage, extra goodies, specifically in the month of August and towards like the middle to end of the event for the anniversary specials. It's starting off slow and kind of building up. As the anonymizer have been received well by Wargaming and the community from what they basically can see, they definitely said they really think the player base likes it, and especially streamers. They haven't seen any, I guess, issues come up with it, like technically speaking, or like blowback from it being implemented. Next thing about battle passes, basically, are they looking to add in option for you to get progression outside of just standard 15 versus 15 battles, like grand battles, frontline, or other modes? Because right now, if you buy the battle pass, you're only able to progress down it, and even the free version of the battle pass if you play standard battles. Also, since most games don't, most games that have a battle pass don't actually have another premium account that's separate, so you're not paying for 2 different things that are like monthly costs basically. Have they considered integrating the improved pass into a premium account, or at least providing a discount? So, big answer here. Specifically with the progression, it's difficult to add into, they were talking, so like special events, so ones that have like their own rewards or lyrics completely different. So maybe like the home front, like Battle of Berlin, you wouldn't progress down that, and basically like rank battles or something. However, from what he said, they are looking to add in more ways to progress down the battle pass and get rewards for playing, basically for modes that are permanent or semi-reoccurring on a regular basis. So I could see that meaning grand battles, maybe they'll add in like some special missions for frontline because that's reoccurring, stuff like that, but less so for like one-off events or like the 7v7 mode that's up this weekend. but they are looking to add in more progression, because in this answer, they kind of want the battle pass to be bigger and I guess rewarding more things and a lot of modes feeding into it instead of it just being standard battles. Now, one thing is they don't know about the price wise and if they're going to change that, and they do, as you can see here. So Battle Pass 2, so this is like the second version of it. So after the first one ends here, I think at the end of June, somewhere in June or something, the next one might pop up right afterwards, or maybe a little breather. They're going to tweak it a little bit, but it's going to be small changes. He said the one that they have planned for later in the year as well is going to have some small tweaks as well. However, 2021 is where you're going to see significant changes to the Battle Pass, based off of, you know, what they learned from the first, you know, 1, 2, 3 versions of it. But 2021 is going to be the significant changes to the Battle Pass system. Now, this question was actually awesome as well. So, have you considered adding in premium tanks basically into the game to purchase with credits? And, you know, purchase with credits as a rental, and then you can purchase it for gold afterwards. And how about turning or boosting a normal tank onto a premium tank? So this is where Andre said Christmas 2020, so last Christmas, they allowed people to apply bonuses to specific tanks. This was actually a test to see if people like that, turning their standard tanks into, let's say, like a premium tank temporarily or whatever. They said the player base, actually, they didn't see much of a reaction that they thought they were, because they were actually gauging the player base interaction, because it was a test to see if they wanted to bring it near term into the game on a larger scale. But they didn't see that great of a reaction, so they're actually going to push that off. But they haven't not, or they don't want to not bring it. It's just right now it's not a high priority. So rent to try basically before you buy the tank. They said you already see it in Frontline. You can buy it at the end with a discount. So they're definitely looking into adding in some sort of, I guess, larger scale rental feature for premium tanks, where you can spend some gold, a small amount, and then purchase it later if you like it. Now, and this is where Max brought up again, if you see new mechanics on the live server, even really small ones, usually it's them testing an idea to see if people like it, notice it, want more of it. So it's them testing to make sure something works before they bring it in. This is where Italian heavies, it was basically no update on them at all. Crew system wise, can they give us an update on Crew 2.0? And this is where they admitted they overcomplicated Crew 2.0 since we last heard about it, which wasn't that long ago, within the past month or so. And they've actually changed it since then, and they have a better way to explain it. So they want something similar to World of Warships, where you have one commander per tank and a skill tree with different, you know, perks and stuff that cost different amounts. And basically with that, so they want the commander of a tank to be able to drive multiple tanks without forgetting them. Awesome. And they also want some sort of counselor system. So they want you to be able to basically you have your commander on a tank. You're going to have like a general, or what they call counselor, that you can attach to them and provide basically, so almost like crew skins in a way I see. And they were talking, so special, they would come with, say, skills and perks that would apply to your commander of your tank without you actually having to research them. So kind of like, you know, Six Sense by default, you know, crew members that you can buy with some premium tanks, or the 0 perk, you know, Brothers in Arms tanks, stuff like that. So they basically scrapped from the first version of 2.0 for the crew. They were trying to do, so tank commanders, then you had them in a group of like 4 of them, then you had counselors. Now they're just doing one tank commander per tank with a, you know, skill tree, and then there's going to be, I guess, so a counselor, so almost like a basically crew skin that you put on them that provides them bonuses. And with that commander can use multiple tanks, so maybe like the same nation, same class. So that seems pretty nice. And they also talked about having multiple builds, so maybe being able to pick multiple you know, skill trees, and then you pick between each build, so you can switch between tanks easier if you're, you know, swapping it in between different types of tanks. And then this was a question that the chat asked, how will they convert everything over to the 2.0 system? That's one of their main things they're focusing on, making sure they compensate everyone fairly and nobody's basically going to feel like they got screwed over. That's one huge thing. And an interesting fact that they brought up, only about 1,000 people actually have a crew with 11 skill, you know, basically perks on it. Only about 1,000 people across the whole entire game. That's pretty, you know, I guess it's pretty rare, you know, and that's excluding like press accounts, sheriff accounts and stuff. Is there any word basically on a third set of personal missions and campaigns coming? They said no plans, nothing, basically nothing they can say, no plans at all. And when, excuse me here, when will we see any changes to Artie? Specifically, Artie changes, they are developing them. Like I talked about earlier with HE changes and shell changes in this Q&A. Artie changes are going to take place, but they're going to have another sandbox test to where whatever they change with Artie, it's not going to come to the live server without the player base sandbox testing it again and saying, hey, we like this, hey, we don't like this. But basically, they'll be in the next round of testing on the sandbox servers from what they said. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this. I know this was a very long video. Tried to go through it as fast as I possibly could. So hopefully you like some tidbits. You know, let Wargaming know on their live streams, on their Discords, everywhere that you love this. So, you know, we could do more of this. You know, thank the Wargaming developers as well, because they pretty much let us ask whatever the hell we want. Some people, you know, I could see like, oh, you know, the CCs aren't going to ask hard questions or stuff like that. We were literally just told we could ask them anything we wanted. All they asked was for us to kind of submit like talking points. That way, any like technical stuff, so like the fire, you know, driving to fires basically go out faster, you know, driving or staying still, stuff like that. That way they could make sure that their answers were 100% right and they ruled out anything, you know. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. Again, scavenger hunt code up there. Tomorrow is going to be Diego. Have a nice one. Enjoy.